Welcome to our bonus episode with Wendy Tepley. Did I say your name right?
You did,
All
yes.
right, Wendy Tepley, welcome. We have a 3-5 manifester who is not an emotional manifester. So if you've tuned into our recent bonus episode, you've heard from an emotional manifester. Now we're going to hear from, what are you, an intuitive splenic manifester?
Yeah, intuitive. Yeah.
Yes. So if you
Mhm.
are watching Love is Blind in the UK, you know all about that dude and his spleen, which if you don't know, you should go check it out. It's hilarious. No, it's a good one. But welcome, Wendy. I'm excited to have you here the day before your birthday.
Yeah, I'll remember this one for sure. So pleased to be here, Katie.
Yeah, I got to meet you in the BG5 Institute, the course. I still talk a lot about my foundations from there, and you've gotten to go on and learn more while I've had to slug away at work and other things. So, our bonus episode, usually I go through people's charts and offer some fun things, but I'm going to ask you to share some of what you're learning with the audience. And what's fascinating about your design compared to my design is we both have a wide open solar plexus, which is where all the emotions live. And I only plug in one place, which is the 39 to 55, where you have two places that you plug into. So I'd love to know a little bit about your experience with a wide open solar plexus and maybe even some of that profit potential that you're finding is hidden inside there.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm having to switch gears really quickly here because I've really gotten myself out of the human design way of speaking about the centers, so their functions, so emotional intelligence, right? I've
Emotional
got to.
intelligence. Yes, let's bring in your BG5 language and I can always provide for the audience the
Right. I'll try and maybe do the solar plexus slash emotional intelligence and get both of them. Yeah, having that completely open. I think the biggest shadow of that is being kind of defensive and not wanting to have those hard conversations. I don't know if I'm ever going to get over that. I always have workarounds for not wanting to go down those tough conversations um, because I'm trying to live unapologetic. Um, I'm learning, it's an experiment. You're learning so much about your life as you go. I do know that I've never really gotten caught up in drama. And it's interesting that when I was pregnant the first time, and I was pregnant with twins, I wanted boys. I have two girls, by the way, but I have three girls actually, but I wanted boys. And why I wanted boys was I did not want to have catty drama girl stuff.
Hmm.
I never liked it as a kid and as a teenager. And I just, it's like nails on a chalkboard. So what do I have? I ended up with two girls. And they're not drama at all. But that's, I can really stay outside the drama. I really don't like that. I can see through it. I can see how draining it is. So I have a good ability to stay outside and not get drawn into that. But it's also at the same time what really fascinates me is to how people live their life in such waves and they don't see how draining that is for those waves. And maybe because I don't have any of those, I don't understand and appreciate that it's something sometimes that is just part of them. But no, I never wanted girls because I didn't want those emotional waves. But now I understand they're more than determined by your sex. It's
Yeah.
what's happening there. So, um, yeah, that's a little bit how I experience it. But yeah, I have a really tough time with tough conversations.
Yes, I would say that's my lived experience as well in a quest to avoid truth and confrontation. I have sugarcoated things. I have not been perfectly honest with people. And what I found I love about coaching is that people are paying for honesty. It feels safer for me to take money in exchange for truth telling than it does to simply just tell the truth sometimes because it's uncomfortable.
What I've found recently with um, is that maybe I am having those tough conversations with people, but I'm intimidating people sometimes now because I just step up and I say, this is the way it is. It's kind of a tough, let's step up to the plate and do this. And it's like, I've had people just not return after a first meeting. This isn't for my human design. I have a marketing business as well. And we had an intern that came and was going to do some work on video editing for us. And I said it in a nice way, but her first pass on this video was not going to make the grade for the level of client that we were. It was a financial wealth advisor, and she had edited it like, this was some influencer on TikTok. And, I've got a lot of experience in marketing. And, when she came in and sat down with me and I gave her some pointers of what wasn't working with how she edited it. And I was very firm and this is what we need to do. And then she started working with my business partner and not me. And he eventually told me, yeah, you intimidated her. And I did this a couple of weeks ago. Somebody that approached me who's a marketing specialist, he's right out of school, and sort of gave him the lowdown of what's out there and how it works. And I haven't heard from him again. So, like, oops.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear feedback around intimidating as well, because I've also received that. And I don't know how much of that is the 17 and 18 in our charts, or if that is the wide open solar plexus, because it is, as a wide open emotional intelligence center, you and I can be very wise about emotions in the room, but we don't have knowledge of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such an interesting thing to explain to somebody of, well, what do you mean you can be wise? Well, wisdom is the emptying of knowledge. And so, because we are empty of this experience in many ways, it allows us to be detached
Yep.
and to offer some of those insights. And emotional intelligence is such an important tool we talk about now. And I would like to remind men that anger is still an emotion. So it's interesting you wanted boys because you didn't want the drama, because we don't tend to put anger in an emotion bucket. We only put those emotions that women feel in those buckets. But I have definitely received some intimidating feedback as well. Perhaps, yeah, I don't know if that lives there or elsewhere, but it's something that is definitely part of my lived experience.
Yeah. So, not going to change that part. Because if you want to learn, you want to improve, you want to get better, there's things that you need to do. So, anyway, it's my journey of learning maybe how to soften that a little bit.
Yeah. And to bring gene keys in, when I look at your relating in your chart, which is the personality Mercury, you have a one line there, which that relating, I have feedback. So I'm actually very good at giving tough feedback. High school kids were way easier to give feedback to sometimes than adults, but I do find I still excel at that. You have the one line, which is dissonance. It's about holding actually the tension between where we want to be and where we actually are. I live with someone that has that. I don't think he's ever received accolades for giving feedback.
I think you're making me feel so much better.
But that's such an important part to be able to hold that for people, right?
Yeah.
There's 6 stages of feedback. I show up in stage 2. I'm here to give you. I'm a great at. Well, people don't give me feedback the way I give feedback, is what it says in the chart. And that also, I see where that really plays into having that wide open solar plexus for me as well. Is I want to provide feedback that provokes abundance, and as I always say, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. It sounds like
Hmm.
you're out there pissing people off with truth that they will hear again. And perhaps that's when it's meant to land.
Yeah.
Yeah, from a mechanic's place, I suppose you're working quite well because you're avoiding the people that are not ready for correction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not personal, really, in a way. It's just, this is what I see. This is my wisdom.
Mm,
Let's work with it. Let's be open to it.
yes. And from a profit potential space, where do you see that you have potential to make profit on this wide open solar plexus
Ah,
emotional center?
yeah. Well, that's a course I'm in. I've completed semester one, which um, was just really looking at what environment we're meant to be in to profit, who we're meant to work with, how we're meant to serve. So and sort of putting that all together into kind of a brand statement for yourselves. Now, coming into the next semesters is when we're going to go into all of those open centers and the traits and everything. So I don't really have anything to add to that, but it's been really interesting that I am really here to serve leaders, which was the very first thing when I came across BG5 and thought that this was where I needed to go because I had had um, such an experience running a former marketing company where we knew everything we were doing about marketing, but it was really the people where we struggled. And people's all about leadership. We had great people, but we just kept struggling trying to bring in more systems, more processes, move people around, more meetings, less meetings. It was this constant yo-yo. And when I found, BG5 as a framework, as opposed to Culture Index, which we were using, and Myers-Briggs and all of these, it really started to make sense to me, and really put me on this path to help leaders, and now come full circle to profit potential. And what I've learned in the first semester is, yeah, I'm here to be in a leadership space as an authority is the one, and the six. It's your future and past direction. Now you're going to have to translate that for people who don't know what the future and the past direction is in human design terms. But looking at the lines of those two, or actually four pieces, the conscious and the unconscious in your design, has really told me, that's I'm here to help them articulate the unspoken and to help them go from anxious scanning to grounded inquiry, and I'm going to help them reconnect with their true inner stability. And those are all words that have come from looking really at the future and past direction in my chart. So it's been, and it just feels so right, so like me. So now I'm going to explore, how do I actually translate that into the language on my website, and how I talk about my business. So it's really starting to align with where I wanted this to go, but it's also making me realize that I do maybe want to work more with people, and helping them look at that, who they really are here to serve.
Hmm.
It's a really powerful piece. I don't think there's anything like it to really tell you who you're here to serve. I don't think you can take any other kind of test or figure it out any other way.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting you mentioned other frameworks. I've had a client who was, it's like the colors. And so the color she had that she was zero in was innovative. They're like, you would hate a job where you just had to innovate. And she had the channel 360. And I about fell out of my chair laughing. I was like, well, that channel for you is unconscious. And so I understand why when you take an assessment that clearly is designed to pull out your conscious
mhm.
traits, that this is where you land. And because synchronicity shows up in her chart as part of her creativity, what was fascinating was that it synchronistically, as I tell her that, she's like, "Well, it's funny you should say that because I just did this initiative, and had and it was an area where she would have never aligned or stepped into one of her greatest strengths that is consistently there for her. It's just a pulse, so it's either off or it's on, but she is the definition of innovative. And funny
Yeah.
enough, her and I share the
Mhm.
same name. So it
Oh,
was
wow.
my dad's background is in numerology, and so he does the numerology of names and sacred geometry, and he brings in both the Chaldean and the Pythagorean theory, both sides of it. So I was like, "Oh, Katie, I know a lot about you just because your name is Katie."
Yeah, that's fascinating. I saw you post about that recently, and it's something I know nothing about. So, if you want to pick my brain later about what I'm learning in profit potential, I'll return the favor.
Yes, absolutely. My dad, we actually, funny enough, my mom, perhaps when we all reunite again, my mom will be like, "You got him to do what I couldn't do," which was he hasn't worked since the census of 2000. So this is the first time my dad has stepped out. Yeah, it's a big deal for him at 71 years old to start sharing his wisdom for a little bit of money. As a 5'2", he just wasn't interested.
Wow, so interesting.
It is.
Uh,
And I really love the way that you describe. So you were talking about the nodes for people that follow human design,
yes,
right?
yes.
You're talking about the north and south nodes.
There
And
you go.
that is fascinating for me as I think about, I have the one line in all of my nodes. So I'm authority all the way. And I'm
Hmm.
looking at the 52 and the 58 in my nodes as my future direction. And the 15 is about bringing so much diversity together. Like, how do you take the people on the fringes of society and like bring them into and everybody come together? And if you look at the Halloween event that I'm hosting, that is exactly what you see there. In fact, I had some feedback from someone that said, it doesn't look like these are as powerhouse people as you would think. And like, that's because they're diverse and they look
Hmm.
different than what you think a powerhouse person looks like. But the amount of
Absolutely.
knowledge and the amount of like just wisdom in addition to knowledge that is in this panel of 13 women is so deep. One of the things that you and I both can do is pick, we can pick talent. We're very
Hmm.
good at having an eye for talent in different places that shows up in our charts. Um, Something else I wanted to highlight as I look at your chart, because I like to bring all of these systems together, is you when you talk about leadership, the 31-7 is that channel of leadership, right? And so
Yeah.
in the star pearl, your 7 shows up as your creativity.
Ah,
And we both have a 2 line in our creativity, and that is all about cultivation. You're a great cultivator of creativity, like a gardener that knows that you have to pull weeds and that there are certain times where we have a flourishing season and there's a time where you sow and there's a time where you reap, right? And that's where that 7 shows up for you, in addition to showing up in your core talent, which is also part of the Gene Key system.
yeah.
And that core talent, I always remind people, is a maturing energy that starts maturing at 42. So we are excited to have you here. And you're
Yeah,
the
well past the 42.
and BG5 calls it a maturing energy, in your unconscious Mars, and you're a 6th line. So systems is really meant where your deep talent resides. I imagine you. Anytime I see 6 lines, that's not specific to the core talent, but the philanthropy actually is your core talent. But whenever I see 6
Whoa.
lines, I also think of systems as well. Um, yeah, and so you have this 7, and the 7 energy is really a great, it's a leader, right? You are the guide. And then that 31 that you and I both share, mine is my driving force, but for you, that's what you're
Uh,
here to communicate.
yeah, I know. It's like, you can't fight it, you know. And it's yeah, that 31-7 is unconscious. And when I look back throughout my whole life, it's been something that people have seen in me, and it's not something I've ever seen in myself. I don't consider myself a leader because the stereotypical is leader, look at me, get behind me, I'm number one, everybody's applauding you up on stage. That's the last thing that I want. But I recently posted, I think it was last week on LinkedIn, that I received the leadership medal in my final year of high school, and I still have it. And, and in my post, I said, I was only the treasurer of the student council. I wasn't the president. I wasn't the vice president, but they were really figureheads. They were, it was the king and queen. They were the two popular people. And I was behind the scenes. And what I did now, when I look back, just stepping up to the plate to make sure that we had the best final year. There were activities, there was, we called it a grad dance back then, and, everybody was going to be invited. So all of these things I did. And then I walk up on stage, for graduation day, and I'm handed this medal, and I'm really didn't, I said, I'm just the treasurer. But now I really understand that. And even in, throughout all of my different careers, I've always been put there to lead things, not to be behind the scenes. So I love it. Yeah, I wish I had realized it, like 50 years ago
Yeah. Well, what's
that
so
I,
fascinating about that channel is it does have to be recognized. And that's the
yeah,
hardest part, I think, in a lot of these, right? For us is feeling like, well, how do we get recognized as being a leader? And in that story that you shared, it was not even you trying to be recognized, right? You just were.
hmm. And then that in public role, I forget what you call it in human design. It's 3 5. So that five being unconscious and, being projected on to save the day. Wow. That's happened time and time again, and I would just do it. I wouldn't think of it as a leadership kind of role, but that's really what it was to help steady the ship, get things moving forward, whatever it was. I would step up to the plate. Um, and I always thought, it's just the way I was brought up. Like,
Mm,
you got to do it, discipline, and all these things that you equate back to your childhood and my controlling mom and all of these other things. That's what made me who I am. If I had their mom over there, I would have been completely different. I wouldn't be, I am who I am because of them, which I don't know, that's a long conversation. But when you start looking at your chart and you start understanding, what who you are and
yeah.
what's deep inside of you. And my mother unfortunately passed away really young. And we were talking about this before we came on air. She was only 50. I was about 25. So and at that time, they didn't really open up about things. She died in 1986. So, I don't have her to go back and see, how she saw me back then. So I'm trying to piece together, sort of the film clip here of what life must have been like with me as a manifestor child. And, I always felt like not part of and I wasn't a big family. I just had one brother, my mom and my dad, but I was always on the outside of things. My dad had a business. My brother worked in it. My mom worked in it. They never pulled me into it. I've always wondered about that. My brother's passed away. My dad's passed away. So I'm really having to piece things together in, kind of a memoir kind of way. But yeah, it's interesting. But I'm starting to understand it.
Yeah, and as you describe that, this is where I really love the Gene Keys journey is, you know, you had a true leadership journey on your own. Part of being, people ask about leadership development. That's what I do for a living is you go out and you live as a leader. And so many manifestors have these backstories of early deaths and and growing up and being in charge of themselves. I meet a lot of those, or an absentee parent, whatever it is. It's a lot of adopted manifestors that I've met over the years.
Wow.
And I only attract who I attract. And I always, what I like to remind people of from my degree in history is that the ancient world didn't see randomness. That wasn't a thing that existed. They really
Mm-hmm.
understood the interconnectedness and the patterns that we see. And so whenever I talk about my own research and all, because I do have a lot of hours of coaching in people, is like, well, this is who I'm bringing into my field. And my unconscious attractor is 31, the 31. It is that leadership from that traditional space of who manipulates words gets to be the leader. And when I look at my whole life and that experience I've had, I've always been working with leaders, attracting leaders in the space of leaders. And I imagine also with the 1718 that we both have, that we are highly sought after because of the way that we see the world and our ability to look at a haystack and
Yeah.
ask, is this the needle you're looking for?
I love that kind of stuff. It really drives me to look at sort of big picture
Yeah.
and then hone in on what's really happening underneath that haystack, not necessarily finding the needle, but really why is that haystack this big and that wide and what's it made up of? And what is it? Looking at those patterns. So
Yeah, that's a
uh,
fun way to hear the expression of this 1817 versus my 1718 and what you hone in on versus what I hone in on. Um, It's been so great chatting with you on our bonus episode today. I could talk to you forever. For people that are tuning in, head over to hear our main episode. Wendy has a great story of marketing and magic, something I find with the 3-5 public rule. I still use that terminology as well.
good.
Is these folks are engineers and marketers to a T. You guys are meant to bump into problems so you can solve them. And marketing is always a problem that people have, right? How do I get more leads? How do I build my
Yeah.
business? And you're when you bump into problems, you also bump into opportunities. So it's always fun to have a 3-5 come in and talk about marketing. If, for those listening, if you haven't tuned into Ashley Peterson's episode, she is an example of a 3-5 manifesting generator, and her title is Making Waves in Marketing. So we will be,
Ah,
yes, we will be making profit potentials in your marketing, perhaps. So head over and tune into the bonus or to the main episode if you're still listening to the bonus episode. And the last thing I'll leave you with, which I find interesting as well in your chart, you have the 57 a lot in your chart. You
yeah.
are quite intuitive in that way. And the 10 shows up quite a bit in your chart as well. And that is your decision maker, that 50, I imagine your spleen, right? So it's coming out of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'll share for those that are following me in the Pearl, your stability, which might be helpful for you to know, is the 10.6. And I have a one line in my stability, and stability shows up in your Saturn. And the one line is all about discipline in the stability. And I have to I'll look it up before we head out today so I can tell you what the sixth line is. But your stability comes from just being naturally yourself.
I
And
know that.
yes, what I hear that you're really finding in the system, and this is why we both like to bring the system to leaders, is the more that you get out of your own way, you can be yourself.
Yeah. That's what's kept me strong all these years with all that happens in a life.
Yeah, we didn't even dive into the open solar plexus and some of the manipulation that can happen there, or the wide open head and the manipulation that can happen there. Um, so very, very fun to talk to you, someone that is a natural leader who has always gone her own way. That's really what leadership is, right?
Yeah.
We didn't learn how to become leaders from books, although I did read them all.
Well, that's what I want to bring to it too, is that you can read all the books, but how do we make it you?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. They have all good points, but it's a one size fits all.
Yes.
You know, people struggle to make it their own and then make themselves wrong.
That's why it's called the science of differentiation. So, for those of us tuning in, I have all the links to hook up with Wendy. If you'd like to follow her on LinkedIn, reach out to her. If you are a business owner looking to find your voice and your brand, Wendy is a great resource for you.
Thank you.